It feels so simple, doesn't it? But behind that simple action is the electric grid. And right now, it's facing a whole new kind of threat, one that operates completely in the shadows. So let's dive into the invisible vulnerability of our power grid.
To really understand what's at stake here, we don't have to look at hypotheticals or some far-off what-if scenario. No, we have a chilling, real-world example of what happens when the digital systems controlling our physical world are turned into weapons.
And no, this is not a scene from some Hollywood blockbuster. This is real. On December 23, 2015, in Ukraine, operators at a power utility literally watched in horror as the cursors on their own screens started moving by themselves. Attackers, thousands of miles away, were systematically and remotely shutting down their power grid. It was the first ever confirmed case of a cyber attack taking down a nation's power.
And the number? 225,000. That's how many people were suddenly thrown into the cold and the dark right before the holidays. This wasn't some technical glitch. This was a targeted, deliberate act.
Now, while the blackout lasted about 3.5 hours for most people, the real impact, the real shockwave, wasn't the duration. It was the terrifying message it sent to the entire world. This is possible.
The attackers remotely seized control and just clicked off over 50 substations. Can you imagine? They became ghost operators inside the system, turning a tool of modern life into a weapon.
And all of this leads us to the central burning question. How on earth did our power grid, a system of physical wires and transformers, become so incredibly vulnerable to a digital intrusion? Well, the answer lies in how the grid itself has completely changed.
You see, we're not just dealing with physical wires anymore. The modern grid has evolved into what experts call a cyber-physical system, or CPS. And it's a good way to think about it. It's where the digital world of software and data directly controls the physical world of switches and power flows. They are totally intertwined now.
In this slide, it just lays out the contrast so clearly. The old grid was isolated, it was analog. Think big, clunky physical levers. The new grid, on the other hand, is connected and digital. It's way smarter, way more efficient. But all that connectivity opens up a whole universe of new doorways for an attack. So, what's driving this huge transformation? It really comes down to a few key technologies. You've got smart meters, which create that two-way conversation between your house and the utility company. Then you have SCADA systems. That's basically the central nervous system for these huge industrial operations. And then there's the big one, the Industrial Internet of Things, or IoT, which is just connecting countless sensors on everything, all feeding data back to a central brain.
And this image pretty much shows you the new reality. A modern control room looks like something straight out of NASA. And this digital layer, it allows for incredible efficiency, sure. But here's the catch. Every single connection point, every single device you see is a potential front door for an attacker.
So we're left with this fundamental paradox. The very same innovations that make our grid smart are the exact same things that make it vulnerable. Every single step forward in technology has to be matched by an even bigger step forward in security.
Okay, so let's switch gears for a second and try to think like an attacker. To properly defend the grid, you first have to understand where all its weak points are. You have to map out its vulnerabilities.
All right, at first glance, this diagram is a lot. I get it. It looks incredibly complex. And honestly, that's kind of the point. This whole web is what the pros call the grid's attack surface, all the different points where an enemy could try to break in. But don't worry, we can simplify this.
We can really break this sprawling map down into 4 key zones. First, you have the system operator. That's the central brain managing everything. Then you've got the power generation facilities themselves, the actual power plants. Third is the transmission and distribution network that carries all that power. And finally, you have the connection to the end customer through things like smart meters. Each zone has its own unique set of risks.
And let's be crystal clear. A successful attack in any of these zones isn't just about the lights going out. We're talking about a serious threat to national security. We're talking about a major disruption to the economy. And most importantly, we're talking about direct risks to public safety, affecting everything from hospitals to water treatment to traffic lights.
So yeah, the situation is serious. But, and this is a big but, we are not defenseless. A huge amount of work is going into building a digital defense for this critical infrastructure. From really high-level strategy all the way down to specific, on-the-ground tactics.
Which brings us to the next logical question, right? What does that fight actually look like?
How do you protect a system that is, by its very nature, more open and more connected than it has ever been before?
The U.S. Department of Energy lays out a three-part strategy. First, it's all about being prepared. That means constantly on the lookout for threats and sharing intelligence. Second, if an attack does happen, you need a coordinated, well-rehearsed plan to respond and get the power back on as fast as possible. And third, you have to innovate faster than the attackers, which means constantly accelerating research and development into new defenses.
And on a tactical level, down on the weeds, experts have some very concrete recommendations. Things like creating an air gap, basically physically isolating the most critical control networks from the public internet. It means using things like multi-factor authentication, so a stolen password alone isn't enough to get in. It means implementing role-based access so engineers only have access to the systems they absolutely need, and nothing more. And it means deploying smart security that can actually spot an attack as it's happening, not just after the damage is already done.
So when we zoom back out, what we really see is that protecting the grid is about so much more than just technology. It's about securing the very foundation of our modern, connected society.
And this is the ultimate takeaway. This isn't just a problem for engineers or IT departments to solve anymore. Securing the power grid has become a fundamental strategic imperative for any modern nation. It's that simple.
And here's the thing. No single group can do it alone. It's not going to happen. The only way forward is through a deep, committed partnership between government agencies, academic institutions doing the cutting-edge research, and the private industry that actually builds and operates the grid every single day.
I mean, just look around. Our cities, our homes, our entire way of life is built on this foundation of power. And it's a grid that's becoming more intelligent, more responsive, and more deeply connected every single day.
Which leaves us with one final, crucial question. The grid is getting smarter, but are we, collectively, smart enough to keep it safe?